Well, what's scary is what happens if Ukraine runs out of troops. That's what's terrifying. Is like, how many more soldiers do they have left? How many more people can they force to fight that war? Like, what is the truth in terms of what are their losses? Because what you hear from people that are the true believers in the leftist movement is that Ukraine is winning and that Russia is doomed. We must support Ukraine. And then what you hear from realists, particularly people that have been on the ground, they're like, it's a slaughter fest. It's horrific. And the ratio of Ukrainian dead to Russian dead is extremely imbalanced.
Right.
That's what I'm...
In Russia's favor. That Russia's killing a lot more than they're getting killed. It's hard to know exactly. It's always hard, like, in the fog of war to know exactly how many people are dying. It's usually not till after the fact, and they do the, like, excess mortality numbers, and then you kind of figure out, like, how many people actually died here. But it does seem... I think there's no question that Ukraine is doing better than would have been expected. Like, say, in the year 2010... if you had said, okay, Russia's going to invade Ukraine, most people thought they would have folded in a couple weeks and it would have been over. Ukraine has at least put up a fight to this point, and I think that that is because of the fact that, number one, NATO was training the Ukrainian military for years, ever since 2014, ever since Yanukovych government was overthrown, and number two, that we've poured an unlimited amount of resources into the war effort. But then that kind of leads to the question of like, wait, so, but if Russia still wins at the end of this, which it looks like they're going to, short of like U.S. intervention, direct intervention, then what did we accomplish here other than just getting way more people slaughtered and drawing the war out way longer to kind of sacrifice Ukraine in an effort to hurt Russia? And it's crazy that the same people who support this war support it claiming that they really care about the Ukrainians. But you're like, if you really cared about them, why would your move be to prolong the conflict and let more of them die? It seems so horrible. It's very strange when the left is pro-war. Very, very strange. And it's almost like this this shifting of the poles that sort of seems to have happened politically, where it doesn't matter what the actual facts of what you're supporting are, as long as what you're supporting is endorsed by the ideology. Right. And that ideology is, this leftist ideology is that, you know, we have to have a Ukraine flag in your Twitter bio. You have to support you. And regardless of, and you're not even looking at the like objective data to try to figure out like what happened here. How did this get started? I've never heard anyone other than you and a few other people online even discuss the 2014 coup. Yeah. No, it's interesting because the narratives kind of change. And one of the things that's interesting about the Maidan Revolution is that, and like I've played the last couple times we've been here, we played clips of like what people were saying at the time. And at the time, there were several people who were basically admitting what's going on. And they're like, yeah, we're stealing Ukraine away from Russia. Ha, ha, ha. Gideon Rose laughing with Stephen Colbert. Right. There's Senator Chris Murphy. He was one of the guys who was very involved in it. And he went to Ukraine several times during the when the revolution was first starting. And but he was kind of the young guy. Like it was him and John McCain and Victoria Nuland, and then Chris Murphy was kind of this younger senator. And he just said the quiet part out loud on a C-SPAN interview back then, where he goes, oh yeah, it was American policy that overthrew Yanukovych. That was our policy that led to him. Without us, he wouldn't have been overthrown. And so like, but now, it's like they would admit it then. But now when you talk about it, they're like, oh, no, that's not helpful to the narrative. So don't mention that we were involved in overthrowing a government that was more pro-Russian and putting in a government that was more pro-West, because that complicates this thing. It reminds me of like there were these pieces in the 90s where there was like mainstream media outlets covering the dynamic of Al-Qaeda and terrorism in the Middle East. And they would just like bluntly just say like, oh, they hate us because of our military presence in the Middle East. That's his grievance with us. Just like, you know, that's the news. That's why bin Laden hates us. No one was going, they hate us because we're free, because that just hadn't been said yet, right. You know? And that wasn't until after 9/11. But then after 9/11,
It was they hate us for our freedom. And now if you were to make the point that they hate us for our foreign policy, it's like, well, where did you get that from? That's insane. It's like, but you all admitted that just only a few years ago. You were openly talking about it. And so it's kind of like that. That narrative doesn't help serve the war party. So now that has to be kind of like in the dustbin of history. That never happened. The conflict started in 2022 when Vladimir Putin invaded. He was totally unprovoked. There was no other reason. It's just that he's a madman. He's bad guy. We're good guy. That's the conflict. That's like that's the tunnel vision you're always supposed to think of war through. And that's rarely, if ever, the case. It's always more complicated than that. And then as soon as you start saying things, which believe me, from the last two podcasts here, I've heard a lot of people, oh, you're spewing Russian propaganda, you're pro-Putin, because as soon as you start going, well, look, this guy had some legitimate grievances. We did a lot to provoke him. And that all of a sudden means you're like on their side. Because you're no longer, we're good guys, he's bad guys. I'm like, no, actually, there's a lot of bad guys involved in this conflict.